Good evening. We are the Willington Board of Education. It is Wednesday, February 19th, 2025. We are calling the meeting to order at 6:02 p.m. You are welcome to join us for the Pledge of Allegiance to begin. I pledge to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. This evening, we have some new business on our agenda. It's involving a special presentation that Mr. Stevens has worked on cooperatively. And so we'll sling it over to you all.
So I'll start. I attended the CIP meeting, I don't remember when it was, recently, a couple weeks ago. Mr. Marshall here presented something that I had not seen in all my years of talking about school building projects and CIP proposals. And I was very intrigued by it. And it was really about long-term planning beyond what in the world do we do beyond year one? What do we do with these projects that are really large that we don't really have great ideas on how to fund? And so I asked if he would sit with me, and we've had a couple meetings now to go through what he shared and just kind of problem solve and talk through some thoughts. And I thought it was important for you to hear it as well, just from a Board of Education perspective. And he is here tonight, not as a CIP rep. This is his individual work. They haven't approved it or anything like that. But literally to the point for me, I would go, if you loved it, you could say, can we share this? Can we promote this? If it's something that you thought was worthwhile long-term, because you obviously make your own requests as well. Hi, Sam. And so I some of this we have, I'm really gonna say you, he's got a massive kind of what I'll call the spreadsheet on steroids with a lot of background information. We tried to bring it back down to keep it simple to get to the point so you could understand the why at the end. And there's one slide at the end, I think, that kind of wraps it up on a grid for you. But you have a full presentation in front of you. I'm gonna let him go through the presentation. I'll jump in and out. And we'll probably blow through the first few slides quickly, just so some of its background knowledge. All right, so let me share this.
You can't be spreadsheet on steroids.
All right.
Yeah, so as Phil mentioned, the purpose, really what I was playing around with was trying to figure out ways of approaching high value, long-term bonded project planning. We haven't had a major project in Willington that I'm aware of and since the library. And we have projects now before Ball CIP and that we've been discussing in town for probably a decade or more. That we haven't really taken the steps to plan for. Much of the focus has been on what happens in the capital budget in year one, with limited exceptions, not much back and forth as to how year one impacts years 2 through 5 or 10, and then vice versa. So you can skip to the next slide. I'm not going to read this verbatim. You guys have it at this point. I can look at Mike's waiting for it to advance.
Oh, sorry.
So what this is based on is you guys, or Phil prepared, or I don't know where it came from, but it's the bond planning analysis that they did for the 3 QA&M scenarios that were developed. That capital repairs about 58 million. Renovate his new both schools, and then a new school project. And using that data, particularly understanding that the note values and the year one bond payment are really what will impact the tax roll. That's your highest level of tax burden, right? Is making that year one bond payment. So taking those and capturing values as a percent of principal you can kind of make this a scale, you can go to the next slide, Phil. You can kind of make this a scalable, right, to identify and understand, at least at this moment in time, because we have a recent reference point in that bond data. The scalable tool to play around with any number of bond value side, number of projects, bond sizes, and identify what the potential impact on the mill rate may be. Utilizing last year's or the most recent year's mill value, 482,000 combined personal property and motor vehicle. That is a mill in budget right there, 482,000. So when it's easier to display on the next slide, I think. So looking at.
And don't panic when you look at these next couple slides. That's why
Again,
we're talking about this.
this is process. So we looked at the three scenarios basically as provided by QA&M, the 58.1, almost $0.2 million of capital repair costs. And also identifying some other projects that we have with the town, the fire department project, the current request is about $15 million for renovations to station 13 or a new station to be determined. That's the order of magnitude it's at currently. The town has also had for decades now a number of significant road improvement projects. Those are coming to light because we've recently received some additional grant funding from the state. So they're starting to, at least the engineering and the planning over the next number of years is planning that. So what this does, using those percentages, you can get a sense of what the potential mill rate increase would be for any of those bond payments in the year that they hit. This is on the left is the 20-year term, on the right is the 30-year term. The obviously the total payment is going to be longer. The total cost of the bond over time is larger for the 30-year. And because of that, the initial payment is reduced, but you wind up spending a lot more on interest over the 30-year term. Historically, we try to do 20 years, at least to my understanding. But there is a difference in that delta. So
one of the things I want to point out is that through the school building committee, one of the arguments that we heard was, well, you're only really narrow focused. You're only thinking about the school. What about other things? And so that's one thing I like about this approach. It's not everything, but we know there's a couple big things between the fire department and the school piece. Those are two big things, right? The roads and road/other are added in there. That you could add in some other things as well to change the bond number. But the idea here is that when you're taking this picture, this approach, you're not just looking at the school approach. You're looking at kind of holistically as a town. If we wanted to do some big things in a period of time, what's it going to cost? How could we afford it? And so that's what these are.
yeah, sorry, I'm gonna just do this because I keep.
Yeah. You can look at it too.
Absolutely.
I'm looking at the bottom lines. Why would the 30-year be less when you talked about it would be larger?
So this is-
longer,
that's the
more
im-
interest?
Yeah, that's the impact of the year that the bond hits. So if you were to bond all that at one time, the initial year one payments, I don't have your 20 and 30-year schedule, but
It's the total bonding number is wrong. It just didn't add all the way down. So
which one, yeah,
right here, you've only included the school in this one. It should, the
Oh.
bonding amount should be equal. I mean, the numbers probably work out, but the bonding amount should
Thank
be
you.
equal.
it should be, and those numbers are right. For some reason that tally didn't catch it.
57, yeah, on the right side, the
So
30.
you can look at where you at, number 2?
Yep.
Yeah, so,
You add the yellows. Right,
Yeah, so either,
And that should equal the 42?
The
no, it should be
15,
63.
No.
correct.
It should be 63 for both of them, man. It just
Yeah.
didn't, it didn't carry down.
Oh, 63 for both,
Yeah.
okay, good.
yeah, my apologies, that number is right, so the total mill is adding that correctly. This cell apparently didn't catch it in all of our playing around, the 42,
The same premise when we go through this is,
Yeah.
it's not gonna matter.
Okay.
The bottom line, when you look at this, what jumps off the page at you is the giant mill rate increase, right?
which is a concern, because it's a big impact in in trying to approach that as a single year hit, or even individually, an 8 mil hit. Is tough. So scenario 3, you're already at, I'll do this again. Is the new school option at 37, or new school scenario at 37 and change? Obviously the total impact is less because it's the cheapest of the scenarios as presented by QA&M. But moving on to the next slide, which is where the bulk of this really sits.
Yeah, so here's the.
So what you'll see here, and this is really, it's not, there's a lot more spreadsheet and math, but it's really kind of simple in nature. It's essentially, I'll compare it to like a mortgage, right? You need to come up with a down payment. You got to save towards that down payment, and that down payment then ultimately reduces the total levy bonding. The second, so that's part 1 of this. So it's an idea that you incrementally save over time to cut down the total cost of the bond. So you have a down payment toward reducing the total cost that you're going to have to bond and then pay interest in over the life of the bond. The second part of this is building up towards that mortgage payment, or in this case, bond payment. So if you would, the concept being that if you increase the amount that you save gradually over time, by the time you get to the point where you need to make that first payment, what you've been, the money you put into, you'd be putting into savings really just transitions to the payment. So you're not seeing that big jump, right? So there's no additional huge hit when the bond comes. So what you have here is, this is a 5-year plan, or a 5-year scenario based on that scenario 3 option. Really looking at what the impact could be if we make a payment in the current year. In this instance, this is kind of, this is structured in a way that it's more like a shock absorber than what we did when the town decided to put that $1 million to schools. This does the same thing for town projects, because quite frankly, last year we only had a $31,000 transfer to town projects in CIP. And we have a number of projects coming up over the coming years that need some sort of reserve fund. And then what it does is it increases that payment each year by a number. In this scenario, the value of 1 mil, 482,000. So each year, the amount you save increases by 482,000 across both. So the total of 1 mil, it's the annual mil increase related to these bonded projects is 1. But by year 5, what you'll notice is you have almost $20 million in the bank that'll cut off of that $58 million in bonding. So that reduces the total bond impact. The year 1 bond payment amount is reduced by 1/3 in this instance. But then because you've increased that transfer over time, you are almost at the point where that first year 1 bond payment of bond and note combined payment of $4.7 million, that is close to what our annual transfer is, what you've been putting into savings. So when you convert that, that becomes a recurring capital debt. And there's no, in this case, is only about $1 million impact, because it doesn't quite do it in 5 years. But there's no big jump. There's no 8 million tax increase to pay for a bond in 1 year, because you've been doing it over 5. And the 20 or 30-year term scenarios are a little, they're obviously different. Because that payment, you'll be paying this for longer over 30 years. So you're committed to that payment for 30 years versus 20.
Let me walk you through so you can see where he's doing all that. Because literally when we met, this is what I did. I stood here. So
Be the mouse.
the annual transfer to the town is their fund right now. That's the 31,000. The school fund, that $1 million, the shock absorber, is the 1.375 million right there. And that 1.4 is the total. And then you have the total fund 4. Okay. So now that's what we currently have. And what he's proposing here on this side is if you then add the $1 million for the town, there's their shock absorber. We keep the annual transfer to the school at the 1.375 million. Now you just keep, it's going to grow, right? Now the next year, the annual transfer increase He's adding 241,000 to the town and 241,000 to the schools each year. And so as it goes across here, year two, that's how much you're bringing in. Year three, that's how much you're bringing in. Year four, that's how much you're bringing in. Year five, that's how much you're bringing in. And when you get to the end of year five, you've got $19 million. So when if you've seen the bond, you remember the bond payment, where the first year we had to pay $4 million. So if you look at this 19 million, here's the cost of all the bond together, 58 million. Take off the $19 million in savings that we saved over those 5 years. There's the balance, right? That's how much you have to bond. And then you're gonna add the 3.6 million and the 1.1 million, which is the bond payment and the notes. That's where he's getting the 4.7 million. That's what we have to pay in the year one of the bond. You can see in this 5-year example, it's a little bit short because we have 4.3. We need 4.7 in the 20-year term one. But if you look at the 30-year term one, again, we have 4.3 million and we need 4 million. We've covered it. So now think about your budget. Next year, if you have the same amount of money, it's already budgeted, it's not a tax increase. Well, that's what's happening in this. In the 6th year, you would budget the same amount of money. And instead of saving it to create a big pocket of money again, you would just take that money and you'd pay your bond payment each year. So the increase would bring you through year 5. Now, through 5 years, you're saving a bunch of money, but it's still expensive on the front side. So in that 20-year term, you just don't have enough. So there's an additional kick that you get hit on because you need a little bit more money and you'd have to increase again in year 6. Does that make sense? You'll see it in the last slide too, but that was the easiest way for me to walk through it. Looking at all the grid. I'm gonna show it and do
The next one.
yeah.
So in this case, this is a 10-year term. So, and I cut out the middle here just for the sake of being able to read these graphics. So we skip from year 2 to year 9, but same principle applies. In this instance, we've kind of leveled it out so that it is a consistent hit both in this year and for the remaining 10. So what winds up happening is it's $500,000. So the current transfer is about last year's transfer was about 1.4 million in capital reserve. This, yeah, I'm doing it again. I gotta stop that.
It's 1.6.
1.65, so about $500,000. It would be year 1. So you see a $500,000 increase to save for these bonded projects, and that carries forward each year for 10 years. What you do is at the end of 10 years, you have about $30 million in the bank. You've got a cumulative over 10-year mill rate change of just about 5. And you've got a transfer level that matches your bond impact for year 1 at the 10-year mark. So when you pay for the bond, it's a straight transfer. There's no additional hit beyond that. And there's $60 million worth of bonding almost. Over 10 years, the hit is 5 mil. The rate of 5 mils. Not 5 million, 5 mils. So that's the impact over a 10-year time is 5 mils to pay for $60 million in concept worth of bonding. The advantage of this is $200,000 in a $20 million budget. It's not anything to sneeze at, it's not something to sneeze at, but it's also not a 3 mil tax hit or 6 mil tax hit at one shot in any given year. So again, it's really just a matter, you can go to your summary slide, Phil.
Yep.
Yeah, and basically what we just talked about. So the 5-year scenario in this instance, and these can be tweaked in any which way we want. The average annual mill increase is about 1.2 bump in mill rate over 5 years. For the 10-year plan, it's a $500,000.
Now, this is only, and this is important information, there's a lot of factors and things you can change in this. The average mill increase, what's important there is it's not taking any other budgets. This is a $500,000 increase specifically for these three items. You have to, meaning, you know you're gonna fund this in year 11. You have to save for 10 years to get there. You need the $500,000 increase every year. That's just on this amount of money. It doesn't take in the Board of Education budget. It doesn't take in the other things on CIP. It doesn't take in the town budget. This is on top of all of that. But where I was saying, and I think this is where it intrigued me, was I was saying, Jim, that's never gonna fly. It's never gonna happen in year one. We need to stop talking about that. And he said, well, it can't happen. It's just not in year one. And the purpose of this is you have a picture, and again, you could change, I asked for 5 and 10 years, okay? You could do it in 6, you could do it in 4. The purpose of the calculator is how much money do you need to put away each year? That's the bottom line. And guarantee that you put that money away each year to get to year 5 or year 10. And one thing that he said that was, I think, is smart is that, you have a bad year and you've got to change this. You can always change it. It just changes your, and you hope you're gonna pick it up another year. Maybe you have a great year in year 3, right? And you're gonna pick it up. The con of this all is this is 5 years out and this is 10 years out. Right? But from the standpoint of, we've talked about how to market this, how do we get people to understand that this can happen and it takes savings to do that. This is that picture. And so there's a lot of things in here that could change. So I don't think either of us are sitting here saying, well, did you think about it? There's a lot of factors that can change in this. Right? You get a better percentage reimbursement rate. There's a grant that comes out that changes this. You get a higher interest rate. Your bond payment is coming down. That's not calculated in this. Okay, this is the purpose of this is really just to show you if you're advocating for putting the money away and keeping it there, not allowing it to go, oh, we have an emergency, we got to use it. That emergency has to be good enough to pull it from. Because otherwise, as soon as you start pulling from the pool, it ends. And I haven't heard an approach like this yet that funds everything. And I say everything meaning big money. Because let's face it, everyone's like the $3 million library bond. That is peanuts. It is peanuts in the grand scheme of things.
That $3 million bond 18 years ago was probably the equivalent of $8 or $10 million bond now, right?
Yeah.
So, but then, yeah, that's the one thing I can't guarantee is the path from today to 5 or 10 years is not gonna be a straight line. It's gonna be a wiggle. The other thing I can guarantee you is that some of these projects aren't gonna make it to 5 or 10 years. The fire station, we have a fire station that's, not functional. I don't know how long that's gonna take. I don't think they're gonna make it 5 years before, so there may be some drawdown, earlier. We're not, but there's so many factors, but it's coming up with the strategy to get maybe incrementally rather than.
Where in this timeline are we able to start building the fire station and the school or repair schools or whatever we do? When can the work begin? Do we have to do all of this savings for 5 or 10 years
No.
and then bond it?
Like I said, you can draw down at any point in this, but what it'll do is change the equation.
Yeah.
Down the line. So if in year 4, we have to pull a $15 million bond for a fire station. By year 4, we have some savings. By year 4, we also have conceivably have grown the transfer to capital reserve. So that it offsets that. And then we continue to build. You might lose interest,
Right.
That's another advantage of this. We'll have interest on
And you don't pay your bond payment until your project's done typically. You
Oh,
might,
okay,
That's
thank
enough.
you.
so
Oh,
typically when you close, like you might have a note to get you along,
Yeah.
you might have two notes. Excuse me. It's really just giving you the money to keep doing the work, and then when the project's finalized, that is when your big bond payment hits, and that's your $3 or $4 million bond payment.
Yeah.
That's where you need to make sure you've got
We've been saving up for
the money
that
to do
over
it,
the
correct.
5
correct.
or 10 years.
Yeah, and again, this is raw. Like we've kind of over the long weekend, just trying to look at numbers and going, okay, what? Is this worth digging into more? And my perception is, I think when we start talking about, you know, a half a mil to a mil increase just for this each year. People are more likely to say, okay, I see the long-term goal and how we can fund it. Versus, there's no way next year I can see a 6, 8, 10 mil increase, which is what you see on those other slides. Yeah, John.
So this is gonna require, consensus between, the, all the boards, I guess.
And the community.
Yeah,
Yes, like even engaging in this kind of a conversation. Understanding how much turnover there is on boards, I feel like, it will be a challenge, not an insurmountable challenge, and one that I feel like is probably worthwhile taking on, but to have a discussion. About how we make this, if some kind of savings plan, some kind of. Looking forward plan. A theme.
Yeah.
As opposed to beating ourselves up every year trying to figure out how to pay for things.
Right. It's gotta be written, in my opinion. This has gotta be a written strategy. This starts here, and the reason I wanted you to see it, because you know, if you're not gonna advocate it for it, it's the end of the conversation from the board's perspective, right? But you're looking at all the different avenues, of how you can fund a larger project to fix your buildings. Right, even if it's 15 million, it's still a larger number, you could still apply the same thing. But thinking about getting all boards on board and then documenting it. So that when that new seat is filled, that person has a roadmap. That board could choose to not use it. But the public should be weighing in on that to say, look, to get us to where we want to go, this is what we need to do. And it may take a right turn, Jen, but I think we have a better chance if it's documented. And it's like, hey, the Board of Education signed off on this, the Capital Improvement Committee signed off on this, the Board of Selectmen signed off on this, the Board of Finance signed off on this. Your business manager, I can tell you, she sat in on a piece of this as well and thought this is the best thing that she's seen long-term because of the same thought process I have about that first year. We just can't afford a 6 mil increase, but it has to be documented and it has to be beyond the Board of Education.
But, and speaking, again, speaking personally, but with the knowledge of CIP. The CIP committee really is where stuff like this. In my opinion, which is why I've been kind of pushing towards this, should be where it's initiated. This is the long-term plan to fund the capital projects. That is its charge, in the end. And presenting that plan and providing a plan that gives the Board of Selectmen, the Board of Finance, the town, the Board of Ed, the data to understand what it would take to get from A to B is really the important part. Then those decisions get made, adjustments get made that, by Board of Selectmen, for example, to be cognizant of, their budget. But again, as long as there's some long-term planning strategy towards it, it should be able to absorb the bumps in the road. As the plan gets updated annually, it adjusts, and as a community, we figure out how to get there.
My opinion is it's easier for people to cut, hey, let's just take $100,000 CIP or $500,000 out of CIP when it's not targeted. What's it for? You know exactly what this money would be for. You have a core group of people now. You have people in education supporting it. and some townspeople supporting it. You've got your fire folks and, you know, emergency services supporting it. So it's not, I think you get a swell of a larger group of people too. To see the big picture and support it, but, I don't know, I think it's, you know, the idea was just to kind of float it by you to see if it's worth flushing things out more, what questions you have, how, what your thoughts are on.
I'm still a little confused about the transfer, thing. So we would need to come up with 1,375,000.
That's what's in the budget right now. Yes,
How do we have that in our budget?
so you, in CIP, when they did the shock absorber, we
Oh,
asked for
that's what
1
we
point.
have on the CIP.
We put 1.5 in last year and they
Gotcha.
cut us 125,000.
Okay,
And it brought it, that's already, so when I say there's no increase, it's already there,
yes,
it's already there. On
This
the
year.
example,
Yeah.
that is the 10-year one, it's actually lower because it's down, it starts at 1.2 million. And we're just trying to weigh this out,
mhm,
right? We could adjust this, we could adjust it and write this out for, you know, a 3-year, a 4-year, a 5-year, a 6-year and drop numbers in. And show. You know, you could have a year where it's no increase and the next year you've got a 2 mil increase, if that would be better for people.
mhm.
The point is. Savings over time to get to X, to fund those big projects. There's a reason Village Hill has been on CIP for 30 years. And that project is millions of dollars now. It's not been funded. It's because it's a lot of money and we haven't been able to figure out how to save the money. And not kill every other project that was requested.
So we would have to get CIP to commit to
That's the
those
point.
numbers on an annual basis for a
Correct.
few years till we
You-
save up enough.
You would be
for that
pitching this
first year
and saying
bump.
that, yeah,
The first year bump, which, and then if we kept the money there, then it would continue to pay the bond.
right. It's a
Without-
conversation across multiple boards, but yes, that's the point of it.
All right,
And what I think where you would weigh in on this is you would say, well, really, we like the funding option for the 10 years, but that's too long. We don't wanna wait 10 years. We wanna do the 5-year plan. And instead of, you know, putting in 1.375 million. And having the increase every year of X, we would rather do Y. You could make that recommendation.
Mhm.
I think long-term, it makes sense though, Jen, right? Have everybody on board. And an agreement of what that dollar amount is, because it makes it harder to stray from.
Right.
You build out that plan, and this is where, when we were talking about this, it was like, well, I can change this, I can change this. I was like, I don't wanna change the numbers. I wanna keep some consistency here. So when we pitch it, if this gets pitched by any board, the numbers are the same. I think that's really important. So that way, if you're in agreement, whatever that number is, you're gonna say, yes, we agree with a $200,000 increase every year. And every board is saying that with the understanding of that's what we're gonna do to get to this dollar amount at the end.
but we can't be spending during that 5-year period, so.
You
we're not-
could, it's outside of this money.
Right. Right, we will not be receiving this CIP money.
This would sit in a fund and build and build and build your,
Invest.
your,
An ideal world.
yes,
Yeah.
yes, that's it, right, in the ideal world.
Mhm.
Right, but as soon as you start to pull from it. That's why I say, people need to understand that this is for X and you have to put the money in for that and not have it be general. If you just say it's a general fund, people will start pulling money for whatever they want.
And it's a roadmap. It changes annually based on all the factors above, but. I guess the large point is this is kind of the order of magnitude of the world of what these projects look like now. And, you know, if I personally think they're all valid, you know, they've been on the plan for 20 years, they've stayed on the plan for 20 years. Or 10 years or whatever they have been. Because they are important, we just haven't, you know, been a little paralyzed by big numbers and fear. Makes it harder to.
And going back to when we can start the work, so once we get all of the boards on board and the fire department and the road people and get everybody on board, then we apply for the bond. Right? Or
So
so we're saving.
you're
and then at
saving
what
over
point do we
time,
apply and start to build?
whenever you're ready with the projects.
Do we have to?
If how long it goes and how much you have saved and how
Yeah.
much you've accrued just determines what the impact is when you need to do the project.
Right.
Okay, and so we want to coincide the completion of the fire station and whatever the schools look like and the roads.
They can
So
all be
that
independent.
we
They could
make
be-
that first,
They can all be separate.
Yeah,
okay,
It just changes, the metric along the way.
that's the point of all of the variables that could change. Everything doesn't have to align perfectly for finishing a firehouse or at the same time you're finishing a school. At the same, that doesn't have to happen that way. What has to happen is the agreement that the money's going in.
Yeah.
And it's for those 3 projects and you're saving with the intent of pulling as you go.
and you sort of have a closing. And at that point, when the buildings are complete, you have a closing and that's when the bond goes into effect. So you
Correct,
want to have that money saved by that time.
You'd still probably be paying some level of notes at that point in time, because you have to do something.
Yeah.
Yeah, the note and bond payments will start with construction and carry through.
And these numbers are based on, taking out the grant.
Yes, it's after, and we only used one number, we just used I said, use the 37 million, use that number. You could run this with the 55 million as the CIP, or you could run this, you can run it with different numbers, you could also. The number we ran it with is the 64% reimbursement number.
Okay.
Right, if that number changes, it changes your picture. Again, the point is trying to present a long-term planning idea to save money, to fund multiple large-scale expensive projects. That's the point.
And gradually, with a gradual impact, whatever that. Level of significance winds up being as a community, but
Do the, fire station and the road work get some kind of state reimbursement also?
Don't know.
Okay,
there are, again, that'll be very, like, I know we had, the town received a grant for, Schofield and, Village Hill.
for the roads.
For some road repairs, it's not gonna cover all of that project. It's not to say we're not gonna get additional grants. Steep grants are potentially, another avenue for some of those work. Fire department is, that number is still kind of hypothetical. We haven't determined projects yet. Could go higher, could go lower, could come sooner, could come later. But if you're on a path towards it, you can kind of absorb those bumps on the road with it, without it being like, if we need to move on a fire station now, that's gonna be a 3 mil tax increase, which, as we just learned in budget season, is hard. So the idea being spread it out over time, pay ourselves first, pay less in interest, which is something we do a lot of here, we pay interest. Because we don't save, we focus on
Right.
1 year at a time. So,
Thoughts, questions?
Your 10-year target. Your fund balance was at July 1st, you have mill equivalent transfer of 2.92. So are you saying to get this all started, we have to start with a 2.92 mill increase, or are you just using that as a?
that's what we already have, that 1.406 is worth.
Right,
2.
that's what it's worth, but it's not,
Correct.
but it's not being added, you know what I'm saying?
Correct.
Okay.
That's
I
just,
didn't
that's
ask that
just,
question too.
that's the
Right.
starting point of
Yeah,
what
I get
the
that.
transfer value is, and the idea being that. In the end, we gotta get to 13, we gotta offset 13 mils of spending.
Right.
So,
Right,
it's a combination of cutting the cost of the bond and then increasing the annual transfer to get to the point where it's worth. Basically, 10-year plan, 7.9 mils.
right, I would consider pulling that line just from there, because it makes it seem, if you're looking at it with fresh eyes, it makes it seem like we have to start with a 3 mil increase, which isn't true.
No, yeah, agreed.
I asked the same question today. I'm like, you gotta talk me through this again, because I'm not sure I get this piece.
Yeah.
Yeah, so the annual mill rate change is really the number.
That's the number you want to
That's the 0.5.
Yeah.
That's the focus.
Yeah.
I hold it.
Yeah.
To try to, but I also, tried to give you the cumulative,
Sure,
just so people understand. That in this instance, it's a half mil for 10 years, which.
and the fund four total, that's what we have from the previous years of, that's
That's,
put away for,
that's the current balance at you, with that 1.4 in previous balance, you're like the 1 million for the school, that's town and school.
oh, okay,
I have the other lines in here, I hit them for this, because it's really the total.
yeah,
Total transfer value in the end, that is the point of this. It gets more complicated to try to say, okay, well, now the town project, we have this much. And it's really the total and trying to hit the total package.
yeah, that's if everybody can work together. Right. Concerns.
So,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah, I mean, I don't. Hopefully, I would think that all the boards would be able to work together, but my concern is getting voter buy-in. I mean, our budget last year got denied, you know what I mean, and it was just percentages of. I don't even think it was a full mill's worth of a change, I don't remember the number off the top of my head. But is there, obviously, we have to come up with an idea of what we want to agree on and work inward before we go outward, but is there a plan for how to advocate or sell this, or?
This is the very start of all of this
Yeah.
conversation, at least from my perspective. Ultimately, yes, there's gonna be a marketing component with this and getting the town on board. It's gonna take support. We've been talking about it on CIP, about trying to get that outreach and.
I wanted to do this from a board of ed perspective, because I think it's important, because you have the biggest project in there. So if you want to advance this conversation, I think it can start here, which is why, as soon as I saw the first presentation, I wanted more information. Because I think if you're on board with it, you could have conversations about what you wanted to pitch. That you could create your own grid and share with others to say, this is what we think would be palatable as a town. But then it's the selling process. Part of this also might be getting community feedback, so that they would say, actually, we think we could do this, we need 11 years to do this, we could do this in 8 years. That matters. Right, but it's getting the feedback again, and you can't. The timing is hard to know, like, a road could fail tomorrow. Flash flood, and next thing you know, you gotta spend millions of dollars. But the idea here is that I wanted the board to hear this, to see if it was something you wanted to build out first. To share more, like he's already bringing this to CIP too. But if we build it out more, then you have a joint meeting. Right, and you have some conversations. You could have just chair meetings if you wanted to do some of the work. But there's not like a plan yet, Sam, because this is really raw. This is, I think, in a week. I saw it and then we met a week later, and then it's just been building, so.
It's concept.
It is, but it's concept long term. Just, Tracy, you should be able to unmute yourself too.
All right, thank you. I like the option, the plan, so I appreciate the long term over 5 years, because I know over history in town meetings and Board of Finance meetings, there's always this, we need a broader long-term plan than the 1 year, and this is the first time that I think this has come across at least the boards that I'm familiar with. So thank you, James, for that. Question about, because I haven't followed the CIP meetings, how was the reaction from them?
So I've shared this with them. We have a meeting in 14 minutes. I've shared this just because I knew I was coming here. And basically to start that discussion, we only loosely touched on it as a spreadsheet, you know, kind of live on the fly discussion. And talking about potential opportunities for long-term planning. The discussions start as we look at the whole plan tonight. They'll need time to digest it too, so it'll be fresh to them. Again, it's really just an effort to start the conversation, and to try to reorient thinking away from just a 1 year.
Thank
1
you.
year hit strategy.
I have a question. Tracy, are you all set?
I had one more, but you can go ahead and I'll hold it.
No, no, go ahead. I'm such an interrupter, sorry.
No, that's okay. The other thing was just a comment that we've tried the one project, one department plan, and it didn't fly. Perhaps if we have a longer term plan and it covers more departments and more of benefits to the overall community, it will be easier to digest and process and come up with a plan that really we can follow through with. That was all.
I'm just wondering what the business manager role is in the. I mean, I know. People have their own budgets, and the business manager is kind of the overseer of that, but, I feel like the business manager would need to have a pretty active role in
Yes.
reminding people of this commitment or understanding how this is impacting the years out. Because I appreciate, Jim, you doing this and bringing it, but I feel like that role is that's really the person who's gonna be with it for long-term predictably. Even if it's not the same person, it's the same role, it's the same position, so that person would be kind of the keeper of the. I don't know.
Yeah.
Commitment or whatever. I'm just wondering if that has been thought of about at all.
I mean, other than I invited her to come, when we had our work session out here, I invited Donna and Brenda to come out. So that we could talk through the presentation that was being done tonight for you. Just to say, what are your thoughts on this? What questions you have? I mean, he's already had meetings with Donna too, but again, I'm gonna go back to. Written plan. If Donna leaves tomorrow, someone needs to pick it up. And not have to call Christina and go, what happened 6 years ago, 10 years ago when you were first?
Well, I see that as different though from, that's why I said the business manager, because that position is more stable than
Yeah,
membership on board.
agreed, yeah,
Yeah, I mean, in my mind, Donna is the keeper of the account, she's the keeper of the
Yeah.
plan, she's the keeper of understanding the impact, the business manager, or, you know. Sorry, I say Donna interchangeably because
Yeah.
that's the case. But the plan itself is really developed. I honestly think CIP should be leading it. Because that's its role, is to develop the plan. And then with Donna serves on the CIP, you know, she's, it's not to say that it's not gonna change, it's, you know. The development and the tracking of that plan is really CIP's role, in my opinion. The implementation of that plan then becomes a board of finance, board of selectmen, and what modifications need to be made to that.
but she would be making recommendations along
Correct.
the way, based on
Absolutely.
what you need.
Yep. That's, you know. That's the role.
I have a question. Forgive my naivety because I'm not quite sure exactly how CIP works. So you had mentioned before, like I understand the concept of CIP, that ours is a 5-year plan. People put forth, like Public Works puts forth, we want a new dump truck in year 2, it's gonna be this, we want this, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
My question is you had mentioned that there have been some things on CIP that have been on there for 20 years, meaning they keep being pushed. So what dictates if we have so much in a certain year that doesn't come to fruition and then we keep moving further and further? Do you understand what I'm trying to ask? Like, how do we know?
It's a subjective call. each year based.
What's it based on, like how much money there is, and then we pick and choose, like, okay, even though we planned for
Priority.
X amount of things in year two, this isn't really gonna be realistic, so now let's move it from year two to year three, or year two to year
We have
four.
no idea how to fund this, so yes, it gets pushed out because we don't think we have the funding available in year one.
Yeah.
Again, historically, it's been a little focused on what's gonna hit the budget this year, and if it doesn't hit the budget this year, we can wait till next year. You,
Or not having a long-term funding plan for those big things. You know, it's just like us when we looked at the first Q&M report and he said $15 million for all school for, you know, the HVAC and the roofs, and we went, well, what? Right?
But is it? Because. I'm trying to just think of how to word this so that I understand. When we have certain, and this is just me not paying attention to CIP, so sorry if this is a rudimentary type of thing. So if we have so much, how do you pick and choose what goes in what year, and then how it's earmarked, and then how do you know that you're setting aside that money for that stuff? So like for us, we're gonna start we have our emergency transfer or whatever for our stuff, the 1.3. And then the annual town transfer is 31. I don't know how to verbalize what I'm trying to.
I can show you.
Do you know what I'm trying to say?
It's a big giant spreadsheet.
So like, how do we pick and choose what, I've seen the CIP spreadsheet before, but I guess my question is that. If different departments come forth, like we wanna come forth with this stuff and we're gonna say, okay, we need this, so we're planning on having this transfer, but then it goes to the town and the town. Denies the budget, so we have to go back and cut things, right? So it all depends on that. So is that why things end up moving? Because, okay, we were hoping that we would be able to buy X, Y, and Z or plan for this. But really, our budget got cut short, so now we have.
It's not one thing. We might have grant funding this year. And they're like, well, we don't wanna lose out on 60% grant funding, so we're gonna do that project. It could be that the house is on fire and I need to replace the house. It could be that they have $500,000 for 15 years that number never grew for CIP. And they had $350,000 worth of leased vehicles. Off of your $500,000, right? So there's a lot of things, and sometimes it's the different people sitting in those seats out there saying, we really need X. And then the board, the committee is determining, well, is that a need or is that a want? Is it on fire? Is it not? Could it last another 2 years? Can we afford it? All of those things, it's not, I don't think it's just one reason why they will move a project. They're gonna take, I mean, I think we presented like 60 projects. Something like that when we gave them, and so our 60 plus the libraries plus, you know, there's a whole boatload of things and they're just trying to weigh like, well, is that a nice thing? The door's locked right now, so do we need to replace the door locks? No.
So essentially, it's not necessarily a hard and fast thing, it's just things putting in the. Just to keep it fresh in our minds, like, hey, just like, okay, every 5 years, we have a rotation of ambulances or whatever.
Prioritize.
You know what I mean? And
Yep.
like, okay, it
Correct.
comes and you're like, all right.
I also think that if, excuse me for interrupting, but I think if CIP commits to this, it might change the model a tiny bit. Where if we did have that written contract of there would be this amount of money that would grow over time. I mean, I could be all wrong with this, but I'm kind of thinking that
You'd build it in your
we have
spreadsheet.
that commitment so that it wouldn't be available for everybody. I mean, if we had a horrible something or other
You'd have to
and
figure it out.
absolutely had it, then we wouldn't.
I mean, CIP, if I'm wrong, tell me, it's just an advisory board, it's not elected positions. So they advise Mr. Tanaka, the first selectman, and
Absolutely.
he makes the ultimate decision. Is that correct?
The board is selected too.
Board of
Board of Selectmen, yes.
And the people vote on it
Yeah,
Correct.
And then the town votes on it.
So,
But, see, yeah,
The people in the audience are listening to those arguments.
Mhm.
They're listening to, do you want the Rolls Royce senior van? Or do you want the senior van that you are buying on auctions.com? You know what I'm saying? Like,
I was on a meeting.
all of those things you're trying to figure out, and it's, you know,
Mhm.
you're making recommendations and then he's hoping that there's a good funding plan long-term. But that makes, and sorry, I'm pointing to you, Peter,
That's all
but
right.
it makes his job or the selectman's job, whoever's in that seat. It makes their job a lot easier when multiple boards, multiple stakeholder groups have come forward and said, we have a plan that we want to move with together to fund X, Y, and Z, not just X or not just Y, so
Just real quick, does fund for earn interest?
just, yeah. Not factored into this, right?
Not a lot currently, but.
Yeah, but 29 million, I mean, there's gonna be, over time, there's gonna be some.
And that's where Donna, you know, that's where the business manager's expertise would come in too, because if we know. If there starts to actually be an appreciable balance in there. We could commit portions of that to a higher yield account. And, you know, in the short term, if we're not expecting that. As part of a long-term plan, so there's opportunities to even increase interest, you know, that.
Yeah.
Instead of paying interest, we receive it.
And you could also decrease the amount you need each year. Because your bond amount is coming down. That's not factored in, we're just trying to give some.
Did we vet the legality of this in that, like, because we're a town? Are we allowed to have savings accounts and like these kinds of,
Oh, you have a fund, you're allowed to have a fund, yeah.
okay,
Board of Ed. Can't have one that's beyond a certain amount of money, but your town. Can have as much money as you can bring in. So just, listen, it was, it's 58,
Yes.
that was meant to be a first go around for you, just to kind of break the ice, see what you think. If you want to call me and ask questions, just take a look at it, if you need some clarity around it, call me. It'll be on our next meeting agenda, I think Brianna makes sense, right? Just to have more conversation about it, so you can walk away with it. And, you know, he's gonna present it more again at the CIP tonight and see where it goes. All right.
Thanks, Jen.
Pleasure, guys.
Okay, we have a quick time for presidents to speak. Anybody here, anybody that wanted, that's all us, right? Like, okay, great. All right, we need to adjourn then, so.
Motion, second.
Jen, John.
All right, all in favor?
I.
Great, we are adjourning at 6:09. Thank you.